is Adam Noyes of AN Productions, and welcome to the next episode of Concerning the Godzilla Saga. Now today we'll be talking about Basson Island, which is a very important island in terms of the first novel of the Godzilla Saga. Now Basson Island is located off the coast of northern Australia, and it has an extinct volcano located near the center of the island. It's basically an extinct volcanic island that was created from volcanic ash. Basson Island was used by the powers of NATO and mainly the United States as a nuclear dumping ground. If they had nuclear waste, they'd dump it on that island. That's essentially what it was. It was far enough away from the coast that it could easily be accessed, but yet not too close at the same time. It was the perfect location. And so they used it as a nuclear dumping ground. And this lasts from 1956 all the way until 1967. What happens is over the course of this time period, mainly it was actually in 1967, which yes, I chose that year for a reason, and if you're a true Godzilla fan, I think you'll figure out why as this goes along, why I chose 1967. And no, it isn't for any historical, in terms of real life, it isn't for any historical reasons. I think you'll understand as a reference why I chose the year 1967. But the UN commissions a research team to explore the island, and to study the effects of radiation on marine, plant, and animal life. Again, a lot of people would consider what's going on in Basson Island as unethical. These aren't really brought up in this current timeline, because right now, remember in 1962, the Cuban Missile War happened, and thus things are advancing so quickly that none of those ethical questions are really being brought up. There's a reason why we chose a mountain in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, I think it's Nevada, in Nevada, to dump our nuclear waste. They dumped this here because it was the quickest and one of the quickest and easiest ways to dump it, because they're testing all over the Pacific. But anyways, this research team was headed by Dr. Raymond S. Connolly, and Raymond S. Connolly is one of the few people to ever cross the lines between Soviet and US nuclear testing sites. He was often let in. He was an American citizen, though he never considered himself one. He was able to travel back and forth between the US and the Soviet Union, mainly because he worked specifically for the United Nations. However, he was nearly killed by the KGB during the Cuban War of 1962, mainly because he was indeed an American and he happened to be on a Russian nuclear test site. And so the KGB arrested him and nearly killed him if it wasn't for the UN's intervention at the last possible second. But Connolly was always the UN's first choice to lead this expedition on Basson Island. And what he does on Basson Island is he discovers an underground lake near that dead volcano. So basically underneath that volcano there's this giant cave, and underneath there is this giant lake. Now this is where things get interesting. He finds a hatched egg there, and then a baby Godzillasaurus. Now this is of the same species, we'll probably do that in a different video, but of the same species as the Godzillasaurus that attacked Japan back in 1954. Not a Godzillasaurus giganticus, which is the one located in the North American hemisphere. This is in the Pacific hemisphere, and therefore it is a Godzillasaurus, and it's a medium-sized Godzillasaurus. The standard Godzillasaurus is a medium one. The one in South America is the smallest, and the species in North America was the largest. So immediately, when they learned that there is this Godzillasaur there, immediately the US and NATO stop dumping their nuclear waste there in hopes that they haven't done that much damage already, because we already know that Godzillasaurus, though it's still unknown to the name wills of science to this day, right through the end of the Godzilla saga, it's never sure how Godzilla mutated or how he managed to survive living through all that radiation, or why his cells act the way they do. Science never knows. They're just utterly baffled by what's going on. He's a complete monstrosity, a complete oddity in the scientific community. But the US immediately stops dumping their nuclear waste on this island in hopes that they haven't done that much damage to this Godzillasaur, because they don't want a repeat of what happened in 1954. And what happens is the UN then establishes a research base there, and it's built into the side of a mountain overlooking the volcano. Literally built into the mountain. There's just a little section that's spaced outside of the mountain. The rest of it is literally built inside the mountain. It looks very similar to the base on Monster Island in Destroy All Monsters in 1968, except a little less flashy. Because the UN, what the UN does is they purchase it from NATO. They purchase it from the US for a very hefty sum of money, and they turn it into their own research base. And this research base is finished being built in the year 1970, and of course it's headed by Raymond Connolly. Connolly basically becomes the head researcher on this new Godzillasaur, who is still a baby. He's about 25 feet tall, he's just a baby. They determined that it was indeed the same species that attacked Tokyo in 1954, and at the same time they find it very curious that this specific one was not totally altered by radiation. Its cells, of course, were altered and it was rendered infertile, but it wasn't completely altered by radiation. It was still basically a Godzillasaurus, a normal Godzillasaurus, which of course Raymond Connolly was like, okay, cool, and then he brought in a bunch of other archaeologists and so on and so forth, and biologists to then study the monster even further. So what happens is that in 1974, tensions between the US and the Soviets begin to rise again, to the point of almost another war. And what happens is the UN basically commissions a giant magnetic ceiling around the island. And this was to basically protect the island from nothing more than fallout in case a nuclear war was to break out. Basically what this ceiling would do, it's not really a magnetic casing, but it kind of worked like one, is it would basically rebound any radiation that would hit the island. And you're asking why don't more cities do it? Cities did start using it, mainly in the United States, but they were unbelievably expensive to use. It wasn't really worth it because of how expensive they were. So the UN just had one, and it was stationed on this. They didn't even put it on their own document spaces, or to protect their own documents. They put it on this island in hopes that Godzilla does not come out of this island. They're that scared of Godzilla. Now, research here led to many discoveries. It led to them realizing that Godzillasaurus basically are social creatures. Again, this was actually before, well, Dr. Yamane, who devoted the rest of his life after the 1954 attack, devoted the rest of his life to studying Godzillasaurs, and he would always go to places where they discovered fossils or bones or so on and so forth, or even a carcass in one case, and he was the one that hypothesized that Godzillasauruses were actually very social creatures based on certain skeletons found near each other. This confirmed it, that Godzillasauruses were social creatures, and then of course there was the digging of the new subway system in New York, and they discovered a whole bunch of Godzillasaurus giganticus carcasses, and that just really reaffirmed the fact that these were social creatures. But what they also discovered with this particular Godzillasaurus is that it's actually very gentle and actually eats plants. It doesn't eat meat, it eats plants. It's an herbivore. And it's a very gentle-natured creature. They can almost walk right up to it and it wouldn't care. You'd have to worry about getting stepped on, but that was mainly because of the monster's size. And he, by this time, was close to 100 feet tall. You could almost walk up to it and touch it. In fact, it was very common for researchers to go out and actually take a scale from the Godzillasaurus, and the Godzillasaurus would not care. This particular Godzillasaurus would not care, because he basically grew up around these people. He's always seen them watching them and so on and so forth. So he basically grew up around these creatures, or around what he considered creatures, what he considered people. Now what was interesting was actually around this time, the Godzillasaur would sometimes want to leave the island, which was very interesting. If you guys watch Destroy All Monsters, they have a really interesting idea that I completely ripped off here. In Destroy All Monsters, there's a scene where Godzilla tries to leave the island, and what happens is there's like this pheromone spray that comes out of the water, like a sprinkler, and that pheromone makes Godzilla turn around, and also they had one for Mothra as well. It was like that red smoke. They have something very similar here. Through a system of large trials and errors, and if they failed, what they do is they detonate a depth charge or some kind of explosion that they line the island with to basically scare the Godzillasaurus off, to make sure he didn't leave the island. But eventually they found a more practical solution and a more peaceful solution, which was that pheromone. They managed to make a pheromone that basically made the Godzillasaurus turn around and stay on the island, not want to leave, or to the point where he couldn't leave. It never was determined which one, but whatever it was, it made him stay on the island. Now, he was given an area to kind of swim, to kind of explore, to get in the water, because Godzillasauruses are actually, though they are land dinosaurs, they like to spend a lot of time in water. All the carcasses have been discovered near water. All the skeletons have been discovered near places where water at one time was. Which leads into why the Titanosaurus species and the Godzillasaurus species often clashed. But, so Godzilla would just, I think I said it was like a 5-mile radius, something like that. It was a pretty decent chunk of water where he can just kind of move around and stuff like that. That he could just move around, and then all of a sudden, if he got a little too far close, they'd set off the perimeter. And then the Godzillasaurus would turn around. Now then comes Sarah Connolly. Now she is the granddaughter of Raymond S. Connolly, the person who was in charge. And basically she takes over when Raymond dies. Her father, Sarah's father, though he was an archaeologist, had no interest in the Godzillasaur. However, Sarah is known for this Godzillasaurus, this young Godzillasaurus. She's known for it, and she actually, when she was very young, nicknames this Godzillasaurus Minlla, as a cutesy little name. And as, time went on, and she kept going there, she kept calling it Minlla. When she was just a little girl when she came up with this name, it kind of stuck with all of the researchers at the base. It just clicked, and so everyone at the research base started calling this Godzillasaurus Minlla. Just to give him a name. Before this, they were just calling it the Godzillasaurus. They weren't calling him Godzilla because he wasn't a radioactive monstrosity, he was still the dinosaur. Now, she, of course, forms a very close relationship on Minlla. She writes several books on Minlla through her studies. Now she's close to 30. Now she's a little over the age of 30. I think she's like 33. And Raymond Connolly had died. Her grandfather had died, so now she's taken over as head researcher on the island. She has a very close and personal relationship with Minlla. She loves Minlla. She looks at Minlla like a pet. Not quite as crazy as a dog, but she looks at Minlla as a pet and sees Minlla for the gentle giant that he is. He's just wandering around the island, minding his own business. And as long as they don't provoke him, purposefully, he won't attack back. He won't do anything back in self-defense. He lets them do what they need to do. And of course, everything changes in 2029 due to Flora, the meteor strike that wipes out almost the entire west coast in a giant tsunami and completely submerges Hawaii underwater. Flora strikes, and what happens is because of the sudden shift in, it nearly killed the... If it was any bigger, it would have significantly altered the orbit of the Earth and would have changed the climates quite a bit. Flora, we got really lucky with that one. But what happens is basically it causes a chain reaction, and the volcano on Basson Island explodes, and Minlla's gone. Minlla disappears in the explosion. The entire research facility is completely destroyed. Almost all of the researchers, there was a total of 43 stationed on the island, died, were killed. Only 3 of them survived, so 40 were killed and 3 of them survived, including Sarah Connolly. Now, Sarah Connolly was blessed because she was arriving to Basson Island to get ready to evacuate the island and to prepare something in order to keep Minlla there stationed and to try to keep him safer. But the island explodes before she can land, and thus she survived. She managed to get off, though she did hit her head very hard on the hull of the helicopter, and she was put into a hospital. However, Minlla disappears, which leads us to the very beginning of the novel of Godzilla and King Kong. And then Miss Connolly is summoned by Colonel Montgomery to the Manhattan Underground Base by General Costa. And that leads into the novel Godzilla and King Kong, The Battle of Earth. Now, I hope you enjoy. Stay tuned for more episodes of Concerning the Godzilla Saga. Go on Facebook, like AN Productions for all up-to-date information. Go on Facebook and like the Godzilla Saga for all up-to-date information on how those books are going. Stay tuned for an audiobook. I'm not sure if that'll be released by the time this is, but do take a listen to that, which is also a prequel to the first book of the Godzilla Saga. This is a short 6-minute thing. Featuring Billy DeBose, who directed the ambitious Godzilla fan film Godzilla Battle Royale, and Jacob Baker, who did a lot of the suits for Godzilla Battle Royale. Join Geeks for Geeks if you wish to have intelligent conversations about anything you like that is geek-related other than My Little Pony. And in the end, this is Adam Noyes of AN Productions saying, sayonara.